Hello everyone, I'm Eric, and this is the art and science of healing chronic disease, where we focus on healing by aligning with nature. And I call it an art and a science because it's very important to understand and to learn the science. But then we need to apply it to ourselves in a way that paints a picture of health for us personally. So this is video number 4 of course 1. If you have not watched videos 1, 2, and 3, please go back and watch them now because it would be very important to help you understand what we're discussing today. And today we are talking more about toxins. Now, when we eat foods, many of them contain toxins, and there are also environmental toxins that enter our body through the mouth, nose, skin. And we're going to talk about both of these. We're going to talk first about toxins coming from food because that aligns well with our nutritional discussion that we've had in the past video. If you know much about the liver and the kidneys, you've learned that the liver uses about 27% of the energy of the entire body, and the kidneys use about 10% of the energy of the entire body. So combined, that's 37% of the body's total energy goes to the liver and the kidneys, and much of that is to remove toxins from our bodies. So we're going to spend some time and go through this to talk about how toxins affect us as it relates to chronic disease. Now, so far what we've talked about with nutrition and healing chronic disease has related to aligning with nature in a way that our ancestors aligned with nature. And this is really important because today, when you walk into a grocery store in modern day life, almost everything did not exist for our ancestors. Almost all of it has been invented by humans. So take, for example, fruit. Fruit today contains about 4 times as much sugar as it did when it grew in the wild. How is that possible? Well, because humans changed it. They altered it. They selectively bred fruit to bring out certain genetic traits that they wanted to amplify, like sweetness, like color, and like fewer toxins. So we're going to talk about this today because this is really, really important to understand how these toxins play a role in our health and in chronic disease. In the grocery store today, I've given this a lot of thought. The only food I can think of that has not been altered by humans is wild-caught seafood. Now, maybe there are others that I'm overlooking, and if you can think of any, please put them in the comments down below. But all animals have been selectively bred, and all fruits, vegetables, plants have been selectively bred. Why? Well, animals have been selectively bred mostly for 2 reasons. One reason was so that they were less aggressive, so that they didn't injure people, so that they didn't injure each other, so that they were easier to control, so that they were basically tame. And the second reason that they were selectively bred was so that they didn't run away. That's part of domestication of animals. Now, plants, on the other hand, have primarily been selectively bred to decrease the amount of toxins and to improve the taste. None of the fruits and vegetables, the fresh ones or the boxed ones in your grocery store, none of them existed in nature prior to human intervention. All of our fruits and vegetables have been selectively bred or modified in other ways, such as genetic modifications of certain foods. Now, this is important to understand because of the toxicity. Many plants, the reason that they were changed, the reason they were selectively bred was to decrease the toxicity of these plants. So almonds, for example, wild almonds that exist in the wild, they contain so much cyanide that if you were to consume roughly 8 to 10 wild almonds, you die from cyanide poisoning. That's how toxic some of these plants are. Now, not all plants were that toxic. Not all plants are that toxic. Some of them were altered to improve the taste. For example, maybe carrots were extremely leathery. They tasted horrible. But now, through selective breeding, carrots actually can taste pretty sweet. And we've seen certainly the same thing with other fruits as well. So there was a researcher a few decades back named Bruce Ames. He worked at the University of California, Berkeley, and he researched plant toxins. And he published a paper back in the 1980s, I believe it was. And the paper said that plants contain 10,000 times more carcinogens by weight than the pesticides do that are sprayed on the plants. Now that's a huge amount of toxins. These are naturally existing toxins in plants. Brussels sprouts, for example, have 134 known carcinogens in Brussels sprouts. These are Brussels sprouts that have already been selectively bred to become less toxic than they used to be. So we have to be really, really careful when we're healing from chronic disease. We have to be really careful that we are consuming foods that do not contain toxins that are going to contribute to loss of energy, because more energy is going to have to go to the liver and kidneys, that are going to contribute to reactions and sensitivities that our chronic disease gives us with the symptoms that we have. We need to be really, really careful that we're not consuming too many toxins. So take, for example, this. You know, a lot of people like to make sure they're getting enough protein in their diet. And one of the ways that people will get protein is by consuming isolated pea protein. Now think about this. When you sit down at dinner, and if you were to eat some peas at dinner, maybe you'd have, 30 or 40 peas at dinner. Maybe you might do that once a week or something like that. But if you're going to have one serving of pea protein powder in a shake that you're going to make for lunch, it takes about 2,000 peas to make that one serving of protein powder. Now, peas contain a significant amount of lead and arsenic. If you eat 30 or 40 peas at dinner, your body is going to be able to detoxify the amount of lead and arsenic that are in those peas. And in nature, you would only be eating peas maybe 2 or 3 months per year, because that's the only time of year that they could grow. So our ancestors never had to worry about lead and arsenic toxicity from peas. Our bodies would get rid of any of those toxins over the 10 months that we were not eating those plants. But in today's modern life, something like pea protein is available at every grocery store all year long. People consume it sometimes every single day in a shake for lunch so that they can get what they think is the necessary amount of protein that they need, but they don't realize that now, instead of eating 30 or 40 peas, they're eating 2,000 peas. So how many times more toxins, how many times more lead and arsenic are they ingesting? And this is a major, major problem in modern day life. People do not realize the amount of toxins that they're eating because they don't notice the concentration of toxins. They don't notice how humans have altered these plants, how we have increased the concentration so much that we're now ingesting very, very high toxin concentration. So I'm going to give you a personal example of what happened to myself with oxalate poisoning. So a few years ago, I changed my diet quite a bit. I got rid of a fair amount of carbohydrates, a fair amount of starchy and sugary carbohydrates, and I replaced that with things like spinach, like beets, like beet greens, like chard, like flaxseed, like turmeric and dark chocolate and raspberries and kiwis and nuts and nut butter. Well, I didn't know that all of those foods that I just said are extremely, extremely high in oxalates. Oxalates are a mineral binder in plants that are toxic to humans. So when we eat too many oxalates in our diet, our body starts to store them. It stores them as these jagged crystals that can cause all kinds of havoc in the body, and that's stored in places like the thyroid, the prostate, the tendons, the ligaments, the muscles. So I had a situation where I developed what's called chronic non-bacterial prostatitis. This is inflammation in the prostate The urologists say that they have no idea what causes it, but they did a whole bunch of tests. They stuck tubes and telescopes up lots of different body parts to take a look and see what was going on. They couldn't find anything. So about 15 months later, I went back to the urologist for an ultrasound of a couple of cysts that I have, small cysts I have on a kidney, and we just get an ultrasound once every year or so, just to make sure that that they're not changing, that they're staying the same. Well, it turned out that I had kidney stones, and the urologist asked me what I was eating, and they said, well, it sounds like you're eating a lot of high oxalate foods, and those can cause kidney stones. And at the same time, I was still suffering quite a bit from this chronic non-bacterial prostatitis. I had pain in my lower abdomen all day, every day, for over a year, and in the process of that, I also developed really bad constipation that I had for over a year. Well, I started looking into this after I got the kidney stones, and I found out that oxalates can be a cause of the prostatitis. It can be a cause of the kidney stones and of the constipation. So I went on a low oxalate diet. Well, here's what happens when you go on a low oxalate diet after having oxalate toxicity. What happens is your body starts to dump these toxins. It starts to dump them out of your tendons, ligaments, muscles. It starts to dump them out of your thyroid and your prostate. And where do they go? Well, they go into the blood. And then hopefully they go out through the urine or the stool. But they can cause all kinds of problems in the blood. The pH can get thrown off in the blood because of the acidity, the high acidity from this oxalic acid, this oxalate. It can also cause really bad diarrhea. It can also cause dizziness. It can cause pain in the eyes. I had all of these symptoms once I stopped eating the oxalates. So I started doing some research, and I found a woman by the name of Sally Norton, who wrote a book, who is a professor at Cornell. She studied oxalates her entire life. She explained that when your body starts dumping these oxalates, what you have to do is you have to add some oxalates back into your diet to slow down the dumping process so that the acidity of your blood lessens, so that the pain in your muscles or your eyes or the dizziness you get or the headaches you get gets better. So I did this, and I learned to manage the amount of oxalates that I was consuming so that I could continue excreting them through the urine, through the stool, but at the same time so that I didn't have these horrible symptoms that I was experiencing. Now, if you want to learn more about oxalates, this is a great book called Toxic Superfoods by Sally Norton. And she has over 520 studies in this book. I've read several of them. I've read the whole book, and I think that it's really, really important for people who are facing challenges with oxalates. So now it's been about 6 months or so that I've been managing this oxalate dumping. I feel so much better. The prostatitis has gone away. I had an updated ultrasound on the kidneys. The kidney stones have all gone away. My eyes don't hurt. The headaches and dizziness have gone away, and I'm feeling much better. The point of this story is that foods which we think are healthy contain tremendous amounts of toxins. And it's not just oxalates that are the problem. There's a whole list. I've got some notes here where I've written them down. So here are some of the toxins that you want to be aware of. So oxalates, as we discussed, but lectins, fructans, phytates, salicylates, cyanide, tannins, glucosinolates, saponins, proteinases, proteinase inhibitors. That's an enzyme inhibitor. Arsenic, lead, cadmium, deuterium, starchy carbohydrates, fermentable carbohydrates, polyols. So take deuterium, for example. Deuterium exists in kale in a fairly high concentration. But if you consume kale in the summertime, the sunshine in nature neutralizes the deuterium so that it does not become problematic for the body. But in today's modern society, when you go to the grocery store, you can get kale in big bags. You can even make smoothies out of it. People do this every day, all day long, 12 months a year. And so they can end up with deuterium toxicity, and they won't even know what's bothering them. They think they're eating healthy, but the deuterium builds up in the body. It can inhibit mitochondria in the cells. It can cause all kinds of different problems within the body. So we really, really have to be careful. We need to know what we're eating. We need to know what toxins are in which plants and what the concentrations are. And then we need to be very aware of how frequently we're consuming this, not just per day, not just per week, but per year. Really, plants like these should only be consumed for a month or two at most per year, because our body needs 10 to 11 months to detoxify from these toxins. Now, as we discussed before, ruminant animals can eat these plants and filter out these toxins, and then humans can eat the ruminant animals. However, there are some parts of animals that can cause problems in humans as well. So a couple examples we talked about already a little bit is lactose. Lactose can be a problem for some gut. Some people are lactose intolerant. Some people who have Crohn's disease can get tremendous inflammation from something like lactose. So we want to be aware of that. Some people have allergies to seafood. Many of us have known people who, they eat some shrimp or some scallops, and then they'll get some swelling in the lips or something of this nature. Those are very sensitive allergies. Another situation is histamines. Histamines are present in some animal foods. Histamines are often created, excreted by bacteria. So for people who have histamine intolerance, they'll want to be very careful of foods that are fermented, foods that are old. They cannot eat foods that have been in the fridge for a long time or have been sitting out for a long time. And some people have such horrible chronic disease that they cannot even eat beef that has been sitting around for more than a short while after the animal has been slaughtered. So some people have to get beef that is immediately flash frozen and then sent to them. And when they take it out of the packaging, they put it into an air fryer while it's still frozen, because some people are that sensitive to histamines in things like beef. So it's not just plants that can contain toxins or things that humans are sensitive to. There are also some animal products as well. And then let's not forget about seed and vegetable oils. We talked a little bit about that before. But seed and vegetable oils are extremely harmful to humans. They contain phytosterols and they contain polyunsaturated fats. Now, phytosterols is a form of plant cholesterol, and humans can only absorb about 1% of the phytosterols in plants that they consume. But these phytosterols exist in very high concentrations in seed and vegetable oils. And when they enter the body, they can replace cholesterol, human cholesterol, in certain parts of the body. And this can cause structures like red blood cells. It can cause their cell membranes to be very volatile, and they'll actually burst. So this is a problem. It also makes their cell membranes very rigid, so that red blood cells may even struggle to get through very small capillaries in the tissue of our body where red blood cells are needed because they deliver oxygen. So phytosterols can be very toxic to humans. Polyunsaturated fats, well, they contain unstable double bonds. And when those unstable double bonds become oxidized, it creates problems for humans. It can cause inflammation in the body. It can cause all sorts of havoc. So we need to be very careful about seed and vegetable oils. And now let's briefly talk about environmental toxins. The biggest one that we mentioned in a previous video is glyphosate. As we discussed, glyphosate is patented as an antibiotic. It is sprayed on crops, and it also evaporates into our air. It runs off into our drinking water. 75% of air and water samples contain some glyphosate. And when that gets into our bodies, it acts as an antibiotic, and it can kill our microbiome. So we really need to be very, very careful of the water that we drink. Make sure you have a filter on your kitchen sink, at least. Possibly even a whole house filter, so that the water that you bathe and shower with is filtered as well. But at the very least, you need to filter the water that you are drinking. It's much more difficult to filter the air that you breathe, but we can do something about the water that you drink. So be sure to filter that water. Next on the list is things like clothing and furniture. I briefly mentioned in a previous video that one of the items I supplement with is iodine, because iodine displaces the bromide and fluoride that our body has inside of it that we're not supposed to have. Well, clothing, furniture, rugs, these all contain large amounts of bromide. It's often used as a fire retardant. It's used in clothing, furniture, rugs, car upholstery. Many things in our life contain bromide for several different reasons. But we inhale that. And when we inhale that, it enters our body and it can displace iodine in our body. It can cause other problems. So we really need to be careful. I try to buy clothing made from organic cottons. It's much more difficult to buy, organic furniture, organic rugs, these types of things. But you can do things like keep your rugs for a long time instead of buying new rugs. There's little things that we can do like that to help limit the amount of toxins that are entering our body. Also things like sunscreen. I saw a recent study and it showed that if you put sunscreen on your body every day for 7 days, then the toxins are measurable in your blood. That's not good. Our body has to remove those toxins. It puts stress on our liver and kidney, not to mention all the other problems that it could contribute to our body. We also need to think about soaps, perfumes, hair dyes, cosmetics that you put on your skin, that you put on your face. All of these things contain toxins, and our body has to remove these toxins. People who are perfectly healthy, have never faced chronic disease, may be able to remove some of these toxins. But anyone that has chronic disease should do everything they can to keep these toxins out of their body. And if they're in your body, to get these toxins out of your body. Now, the body will excrete most of these toxins once we stop putting them into our body. But we have to really be careful of what's going into our body. So for myself, one of the things that I've done is I've shifted my diet so that my diet right now contains almost zero plants. I have a little coffee here or there. I have a little bit of organic, very dark chocolate to manage the oxalate dumping that I have going on that I mentioned. Aside from that, I don't eat any plants. I'm giving my body the chance to get rid of all these toxins. And I've noticed significant differences, some of which I've talked about in previous videos, and some of which I'm talking about in this video. So if you're fighting chronic disease, do everything you can to get rid of as many toxins as possible. If you just get rid of 1 or 2 toxins that you're exposed to on a daily basis, it may not do much. But if you can get rid of dozens and dozens and dozens of toxins that you're exposed to every single day from your food, from your environment, it will greatly increase the chances that you're going to heal from whatever chronic disease you are fighting. These toxins are major contributors. Just think about it. Prior to the year 1900, I can find no evidence of any person having a heart attack. And the same is true with Alzheimer's, cancer, type 2 diabetes. I cannot find any evidence. If you can, please put it in the comments down below if you can find any documented cases of these chronic diseases. But I can't find any. So something happened in the 1900s that has increased our chances of contracting these diseases. And one of those contributors is toxins. Now, some people will say, well, we're only seeing more heart attacks, more cancer, more Alzheimer's now because people are living longer. But that's not true. On average, people are living longer. And that's because we were able to fix many of the diseases that killed infants, that killed toddlers. We were able to fix many of the deaths that were caused during the birthing process. And because we've been able to fix these problems that occurred in infants and toddlers, the average life expectancy has gone up. If a child was born and survived the birth, the average life expectancy prior to 1900 might have been the mid-40s. But if they made it to age 10, then the life expectancy was the upper 50s. And if they made it to age 20, the life expectancy was near age 70, and so on and so forth. The longer they lived, the higher the probability that they were going to live longer. So getting through those first 20 or 30 years really increased the average age of life expectancy. And so people were regularly living into their late 70s, early 80s, where today we're getting heart disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's. Those did not exist prior to the year 1900, even with people living to the same ages. So this is a serious problem, not just in the United States, but across the world. You know, in the United States, 50% of people have pre-diabetes. That's a really, really high number, and a large percentage of those people are going to develop diabetes, and that's going to really increase their chances of developing cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, and so on. There's many, many other chronic diseases besides those three, and many of us are facing them. But toxins plays a big role. So do everything you can to avoid toxins. We've gone long enough for today. I will start working on the next video, and I hope that you found this helpful, and we'll talk to you soon.